Hi, everybody. I'm Josh Earl.
And I'm Will Garcia.
And together we're the Hoops Guys. And we're continuing our 2014-2015 NBA season previews today by talking about the Orlando Magic. So, Will, was their last year magical?
It's not magic.
Yeah.
23-59. It went pretty rough, but that was to be expected. This was a really young team with a bunch of young guys and recent draft picks. And the word tanking gets thrown around a lot. They were not tanking.
No, this is a rebuild. Yeah.
Exactly. This is a rebuilding team, and they did about what they expected.
Yeah. Considering they kind of met expectations, but low expectations, there were some good things that happened for the Magic, but really outside of finishing 6th in converting mid-range shots, there weren't any on offense.
Right.
On defense, they did finish 16th in defensive rating, which doesn't sound great, but considering the expectations on this team, it was kind of a bright spot.
Absolutely, and I think that a lot of that was because they forced teams into sort of analytically poor shots. Teams shot the 5th fewest shots in the restricted area and 7th fewest shots in the paint against them per Ian Levy's awesome XPPS. That is always in the description below because it is always awesome.
Mm-hmm.
And additionally, they forced teams into the 4th most mid-range jumpers and tied for 10th fewest in corner 3-point attempts against them. So a lot of, don't want to say bad shots, but a lot of shots that are at least analytically not the best.
Yeah, with all that in mind, it shouldn't come as a surprise that they finished 8th in expected points per shot, defensively at least, and that the defense was further helped by the team not really giving up easy looks off putbacks, as the Magic finished 10th in defensive rebound percentage. And a lot of that is because of
Gucci Mane!
Yes, Nikola Vucevic.
Exactly. That was I just did the worst Gucci Mane impression ever.
Yes.
He had a really solid year for the Magic, putting up 14 and 11 on pretty okay efficiency numbers, which are really good considering the way where he's getting his shots from.
Yep.
He finished 8th in the league in rebounds per game and 12th out of traditionally qualified players in total rebound percentage. The guy's a monster on the glass. As you like to say, he cleans it up like Windex.
Yep.
And he continued to shoot the ball well from the post. He's a really insanely good touch. And he also shot about 40% from 16 to 3.
Which isn't bad, no.
Isn't bad at all, considering that he's known as a mid-range threat.
Yeah. Vucevic also recently signed a 4-year, $52 million extension, which we'll talk about a little bit later. So he's also going to be a piece going forward for the Magic for quite some time.
Absolutely. And speaking of guys who are going to be a piece going forward for quite some time, Victor Oladipo.
Yes.
He had an encouraging rookie year, especially considering that he was put into a pretty big role. He finished top 3 in rookies in scoring and assists and steals. Oladipo's contributions weren't the best from an efficiency standpoint. Only 51% true shooting, which is bad. Not terrible, but bad. But when you consider the role he was in, and he's also just a rookie, I wouldn't say it's a bad year.
Yeah. And it's funny because he's got this defensive reputation, but he still has a ways to go to actually really earn it as a defensive stopper. His jumper, it looked better in that final year at Indiana, but it still could use some work.
Yeah.
And he desperately needs to reduce his turnover problems. He turned it over 3.2 times per game last year, but part of that was the fact that they were trying to place him in a point guard role, which he wasn't really prepared for.
Right.
And in some ways, it was kind of a smart idea that year was going to be kind of a wasted year anyway in terms of trying to contend for the playoffs. So you might as well try to give him a lot of reps in a skill set that you're hoping he'll be able to develop down the line. so that at the very bare minimum he can become one of those tertiary ball handlers that can be very valuable from the wing position.
Absolutely.
But all that said, he's a very key piece of this Orlando team, and for a lot of understandable reasons.
Yeah, exactly. And there are also a lot of understandable reasons why, as mentioned earlier, there weren't too many good things going on for this offense for the Magic. 29th in offensive rating, 28th in XPPS, 22nd in points per shot.
Yeah. So that analytically proficient defense didn't really carry over to the other side of the floor with the Magic. They shot the most mid-range jumpers of any team in the league, which, analytically speaking, is the lowest value shot in basketball. Additionally, they shot the 4th fewest above the break threes and the 7th fewest free throws per field goal attempt, aka the most efficient shot in basketball.
Yeah. And even in the analytically solid areas, the team just wasn't making shots. They were 27th in corner 3 field goal percentage and 25th in restricted area field goal percentage.
Yeah. Coming back to the defensive side, while they were solid, as we mentioned, there were some things that they can improve upon this year. Namely, they really struggled at creating turnovers. They finished 20th in turnover rate on defense. This Magic team, the reason this is something that I wouldn't necessarily term systemic is because their team has kind of been being built around quick, young, defensive-minded athletes with the seemingly intention of being able to get out into the fast break. And the best way to do that is through live ball turnovers.
Yeah.
So this is something they'll probably be trying to address more this year and going forward.
Yeah, and I think something else they should try to address, as you mentioned, their long athletic perimeter defenders. They didn't defend threes last year very well at all. This team finished 23rd in basically both types of threes, corners and above the break, in terms of field goal percentage. So I think there was a lot of rookie mistakes going on out there.
One player who won't be bringing rookie mistakes, and also we were just talking about three-point defense. This guy's going to bring three-point offense.
Yeah.
Their major addition this offseason, at least in my and Will's opinion, was Channing Frye. We mentioned this on the Phoenix Suns video. He is one of maybe 3 big men in the entire, one of 4 actually, big men in the entire NBA that is actually feared from the three-point line. There's a lot of guys who are quote-unquote stretch bigs who can occasionally hit the three if open. There are only 4 guys where the defenses are really scared when they're standing out at the three-point line, and that's Dirk, Kevin Love, Rhino, a.k.a. Ryan Anderson, or grenade launcher, I guess, as Zach Lowe said. I hadn't heard that one yet, but that's a good one too. And, of course, Channing Frye. And a lot of this is due to Channing Frye not only being really tall. A lot of stretch bigs are more power forwards than they are center size, and Channing Frye's 7-footish. But not only can he shoot a really high percentage from 3 and do it consistently on a high volume, but he not only has a very high release point, but he's got a very quick release too.
Right.
So it makes for a very tough shot to close out on and contest. So his ability to shoot the 3 is something that the Magic really are going to like this year.
He earned the sort of defensive reputation that you mentioned in terms of like attention from the defense. And that's kind of called gravity, I guess is the new word for that. All the cool kids are saying it.
Yeah, I suppose.
Whatever it is, it's going to be really important for this team because things are going to get pretty tight up there because this team needs shooting. This team needs shooting, and Aaron Gordon also needs to work on his shooting. Having said that, there's some good stuff to talk about, quite a bit actually. He is the youngest player in the entire league I think he's taken over Giannis' spot from last year. And he was the 4th pick in this year's draft, and he really impressed scouts with his length, athleticism, and energetic defense and rebounding. But I still think he's a project in pretty much every sense of the term.
Absolutely agree.
He needs to improve his offensive skills. He is raw. You're going to be getting botulism from watching this guy.
He's offensive Botox.
Yeah. He doesn't have much of a back-to-the-basket game, doesn't really have much of a face-up game, doesn't have the best touch as a shooter, as his 42% free throw shooting can indicate. He isn't really the most skilled player yet. They're kind of hoping that he can learn how to play basketball.
Fortunately speaking, he can contribute right away as kind of a garbage man type in the sense of energy and hustle and a strong defensive work ethic at the bare minimum. But he's going to need to hone his skills on both ends of the court to be the impact player that I think the Magic think he might be able to be.
Yeah, and I think you can say the same thing about Elfrid Payton.
Yeah.
The Magic continued their tradition of getting long, young, athletic, high-effort guys who also can't shoot their way out of a barn.
Yeah.
And they took Harry Payton.
Yep.
And we're going to get that trending.
Yes.
That is going to be a thing.
Payton.
That's going to be a thing.
He is on our all-hair team. He's the starting point guard for the all-hair team.
Yeah. I think he's going to start from day one. He actually did start on day one.
Yeah.
And Magic fans should expect him to play aggressive, sometimes over-aggressive defense, generate a lot of steals, push the pace frequently, kind of getting back to what we alluded to about this team needing to shore up its turnover rate a bit on defense, get that a little higher so that they can push the pace. Elfrid Payton is your guy if you want to do that. Having said that, they should also expect subpar shooting from both the field and the line. I'm pretty sure he shot like 60% last year from the free throw line. Those are some pretty poopy numbers.
Yes.
And another thing that's a little not awesome is that there are going to be a lot of turnovers and a lot of unforced errors.
Yeah, and, part of that, he's a rookie point guard transitioning to the NBA. He had turnover and unforced error issues already in college, especially against tougher opponents. Mm-hmm. So that's definitely going to be something that he'll struggle with, at least at the start of his NBA career for the first couple of years. Yep. But ultimately, the biggest question when it comes to Harry Payton is if defenses are going to actually respect his shot even merely enough for him to be able to get the kind of penetration that he needs to set up his game. And if they don't respect that mid-range three-point type threat that he may or most likely won't represent, it's going to really cramp the strength that he's supposed to be able to bring offensively.
Yeah, but they also brought in a guy who will have no problems getting his jumper respected, and his name's Evan Fournier.
Also, a potential hair team member, at least with the look he was rocking in the first game.
Yeah, the little bun thing, like ponytail-looking thing.
I kind of dig it.
I kind of dig it, too. I'd never wear it. But
I couldn't pull it off. But
I can dig it on him. Yeah. It's kind of like fringe boy band kind of thing.
Yeah.
Anyway, his shot is damn good, just like his hair. Yeah. And for a guy who just turned 22 last Wednesday, happy belated birthday, dude. He has an impeccable offensive skill set, I think. He shot 39% for his career from three. He's also a really crafty finisher. He's just really a generally crafty player, which you kind of have to be when you 31-inch vert, not the fastest. But he's a capable ball handler, and I think he has really underrated court vision and facilitation skills in terms of being able to hit guys, especially for a wing. It's sort of like a secondary, tertiary ball handler type. I think he can fill that role pretty well, too. And defensively, the guy fights through screens. He stays on his assignments, and he operates well in a team defensive system. But he isn't, like I alluded to earlier, long or athletic enough to be your typical lockdown guy, nor is he really big enough or strong enough to guard like a LeBron. To be fair, who is, but, like a bigger wings can sort of take their way on the guy a little bit just because they have like 40, 50 pounds on him. But he's still a plus on both ends.
Especially considering Oladipo's out for the start of the year with that facial fracture. We hope Oladipo has a quick recovery and is feeling better soon. But at least the Magic have Fournier to cover some of those minutes while Oladipo's out.
I feel really bad for anyone who breaks their face.
Yeah. One guy whose face is not broken, at least right now, is Luke Ridnour.
Yeah.
He's a 33-year-old point guard who's mostly a serviceable backup right now, but he's capable of running the offense without screwing you over much. He shoots the ball reasonably well, and he's a very solid veteran presence on a very young team. So Will and I both like him as the kind of backup point guard and kind of a mentor type for Elfrid Harry Payton to kind of learn from.
Absolutely. Another veteran that they brought in is Ben Gordon. He's another spacing threat, which his team really, really needs. And he's fallen off quite a bit since he was in Chicago.
Yeah.
But he's still a serviceable sort of space threat you can bring in off the bench, especially on this sort of team. Like, as we mentioned, when you're playing those sorts of players they have, oh my God, you need some people who can shoot.
Yeah. Another guy who can shoot that they brought in was Willie Green. Mm-hmm. He's another capable spacing threat who can function somewhat as a secondary or more accurately, like thirdly, ball handler for some stretches. But he's not going to see many minutes when he's slotted behind Oladipo, Fournier, and Ben Gordon. But he does provide something that they could use, which, once again, shooting.
Exactly. One guy who won't be providing that, but has some other skill sets he can provide, Devin Marble. I'm kind of confused. Is it Roy Devin Marble or just Devin Marble? Because I see it being
Honestly,
gone both
I forget.
ways. Anyway, whoever the hell it is, he had a good year at Iowa, but he could really stand to improve his shot selection and perimeter shooting, which most young guys can.
Yeah. But those were the additions, but there were also subtractions from this match.
Yeah, there were two big ones.
Year. Pretty much their two veteran leaders are gone from last year. Aaron Aflalo was traded to the Nuggets, and by trading him, Orlando kind of lost one of the two best two-way wings in basketball. His defense isn't quite what it used to be, but he is a very capable two-way wing, and there's not a whole lot of them out there. He was the main man for the Magic this past year, and he really kind of excelled in that role. He's more of a capable off-ball threat and spot-up shooter, so he's always a threat to score. In fact, that was part of why he was so valuable on those Nuggets teams before he came over to the Magic, was he was a great third or fourth option on a team that had a variety of primary ball handlers and tertiary ball handlers. He was a guy who, if you kicked it to him, he could not only catch and shoot, but he could come off screens, catch, turn, hit it, and also attack closeout defenders. So he always had the off-ball skills to be a threat, which on this team was very valuable, and the defenses always had to kind of respect him for that. Yeah,
but as we saw in Orlando, he's also a really capable on-ball guy.
Yeah.
He's a decent shot creator for himself, and he has good shot selection, which is an important part, I think, of being a scorer. And he's a willing and skilled passer as well. I think he's, like Fournier, a little underrated there. And on defense, as you alluded to earlier, it has been a bit of a downturn for Aaron, but I'm not sure. I think there are potential reasons for that. And I mean, it's not the guy's 40.
No.
So
part of it might be just the sheer increase in his offensive responsibility.
Yeah. So when he's on his game, he plays a really gritty, smart, fundamentally solid, and risk-averse sort of style of defense where he's not gambling, he's not doing anything crazy. He's basically doing what every coach across the country at pretty much all levels of basketball wants their guys to do.
Speaking of veteran leadership last year for the Magic, and also for the past decade, basically, Jameer Nelson is no longer an Orlando Magic player.
By the way, how do you put that as a singular noun for a player?
I don't know. I think you have to add the player aspect, because you can't really just be, he's an Orlando Magic.
I mean, they need to have a secondary sort of name for the player thing. Yeah. It's called magicians or something. I don't know.
Yeah. But anyway, the Magic lost their long-term leader, locker room presence, and veteran in Jameer Nelson, who of course left for Dallas in free agency. Jameer wasn't ever really a top point guard per se, but he's very reliable spot-up shooter from the perimeter, a very skilled facilitator who can run the offense very well. I think in the Dallas Mavericks preview, I mentioned that he's a pretty good approximation of Jose Calderon in terms of skill set. A very capable shooter, rather than capable, a very good shooter, especially in more catch-and-shoot scenarios, who's also going to run your offense textbook-wise. He's going to textbook your ass to grass just in terms of getting the offensive action started, making sure people are in the right position, calling out the play on the court, that sort of thing. And he can facilitate very well.
Yeah, absolutely. Going from a guy like Jameer to a guy like Elfrid Payton, and this is a knock on Elfrid Payton, he's 20.
Yeah.
It's going to be a bit of a drop-off for a while.
Definitely.
And especially on offense.
Yes.
Speaking of a drop-off, the Magic did not have a drop-off in terms of the possessions that they brought in during the offseason. All the additions that the Magic made led to them bringing in 15 more possessions per game than they gave up during the offseason. So there'll be some guys who have to take some smaller roles this year.
Yeah, and it'll probably just round itself out, I think.
I think so, too.
Tobias and Oladipo will probably take slightly smaller roles. Fry will probably play a pretty similar role as he did with Phoenix last year. Vucevic might feel a little pinch, maybe a couple less touches per game. But across the board, I think it'll round itself out. And this team doesn't really have a primary shot creator right now or a primary scorer. So it's not like somebody's going to be taking 20 shots a game every night. It's going to be more of an ensemble type thing. And exactly. I think those possessions are going to get spread out across the ensemble.
Exactly. Speaking of guys who don't take 20 shots every night, we don't ask 20 questions any night, because we do a segment called 5 Questions, where we ask 5 questions.
Yeah. We're like Dylon, instead of saying the top 20 greatest rappers of all time, who, just between us, they're all Dylon. We stick with just the top 5, which are
also all Dylon.
Yes, also all Dylon.
Because we spit hot fire.
Yes.
So I think I'm going to ask the first question.
Yep.
And that would be, with the replacement of Jameer Nelson with a rookie and Elfrid Payton, I've been trashing on Elfrid Payton a lot. I don't mean to.
No.
Is that going to result in Oladipo spending more time as a nominal point guard? And if so, how will that work out?
He won't be spending more time as a nominal point guard. He was basically the backup point guard to Jameer last year.
Yep.
So he's not going to get an increase in the number of minutes spent at point guard. But the Magic also brought in guys like Luke Ridnour and Fournier, who are also capable ball handlers. If anything, I think Oladipo might get a little less time as a nominal point guard. He's still going to be put in that role. They're still trying to develop his shot creation off the bounce, and his facilitation off the bounce, trying to round his skill set out more as a scorer. And once again, I don't really see a problem with that, in the sense that they're rebuilding. They're not tanking, they're rebuilding. And considering they're not expecting to be in the playoffs this season or next necessarily, they're trying to develop their core as best they can. I think he'll still see some of those responsibilities, but his minutes as a nominal point guard are going to go down. Next question's for you, buddy. Was Nikola Vucevic's 4-year, $52 million extension a fair deal, a steal, or was it an overpay?
I think it was a good deal for the Magic, and probably also a good year for Gucci Mane. I think it went pretty well both ways there. That seems to be about what the market value is like for those sorts of bigs.
Yep.
Considering he's a pretty young dude who can contribute things that a guy like DeAndre Jordan can't. To be fair, DeAndre Jordan can also do things that like Gucci Mane can't too.
Yes.
But and one of those is called jumping. But he has a really interesting skill set, and I think that there might be some other another thing that he can do that he isn't doing that we're gonna get later, that I think would have increased his value even further.
Yeah.
So I think they had a pretty good deal.
Yeah, I tend to agree. I think it was a good deal for Vucevic in particular, just because this next year there stands to be several bigs on the market.
True.
That could draw some interest and would stretch his kind of time waiting on an offer longer, and he might wind up with the same deal or slightly less, just because that there are guys like Marc Gasol, the aforementioned DeAndre Jordan, Omer Asik, Kosta Koufis, Robin Lopez.
Yeah.
There's a lot of guys that'll be available. Even Roy Hibbert, if he were insane, has a player option where he can be a free agent this offseason. So there could potentially be a surplus of quality starting centers available. And Vucevic would be in the middle of that pack, but it might depress the market value a little bit. Or there could have been an opportunity where if those guys all kind of re-signed quickly or signed elsewhere quickly, anybody that missed out on one of those guys might have thrown a big offer at Vucevic, which is why it was also a pretty good deal for the Magic.
Speaking of good young players, this team's young nucleus is, like we mentioned, Elfrid Payton, Aaron Gordon, Oladipo, Tobias Harris, Mo Harkless, Nikola Vucevic. Now, even with Fry, the offense is going to need some Mucinex because things are going to get a little bit congested.
Yeah.
So how does this team address that issue going forward?
I think with them, they're actively pursuing guys who are defensive first, athletic, high effort guys. So I think they seem to feel they can develop them as shooters. And this is generally the skill set that most people in the industry believe can be developed from even poor range to good. So I think they're really interested in internal development and being able to teach Oladipo, Aaron Gordon, Mo Harkless, Harry Payton how to shoot. I think it's a bad idea, actually. Personally, I think it's kind of a silly idea to think you can take multiple players, especially multiple core players, who all can't shoot. And I'm lumping Oladipo in that because he only took a very small number of threes his final year at Indiana. He shot well, but the sample size was ridiculously small, and he didn't shoot that well in the NBA.
Yeah, I think 32% from there.
So if you're talking about we can improve one or two guys, then yeah, maybe that's doable. When you're thinking, well, we don't need to emphasize shooting as a skill set from our core players, we can develop that. If your entire core can't shoot, you're going to have a lot of issues. And some of this is coaching related too.
Absolutely. Jacques Vaughn said about Nikola Vucevic acting like a stretch five. A bit of context. When I first started watching Vucevic, I saw him taking all those ridiculously long twos. I'm like, oh shit, this is a guy who's being told by his coach not to shoot threes. Then I looked at his shot chart, and you see basically everything's you have toe on the line jumpers and post ups. I'm like, oh, okay, this is a guy being told by his coach not to shoot threes. So I do a little bit of a Google search. Sure enough, he's being told by his coach not to shoot threes. He said, I'm not sure we want to take him there. I think the next phase for him is to be extremely comfortable on the block. Which, okay, fair enough. That makes sense if you have other guys on your team who can shoot.
Yeah.
But they don't. Nikola Vucevic is probably one of their best three-point threats, and he doesn't even shoot threes.
Let that sink in. Their center, who doesn't even shoot threes, is their best floor spacer on the returning roster. Channing Frye is obviously their best three-point shooter now, and guys like Willie Green, Ben Gordon, and Luke Ridnour can all shoot from three. But they had to also bring in those veteran guys, in part because none of the core young players can shoot.
Yeah.
And they're apparently being dissuaded from shooting the three when they are actually a good
capable
shooter,
of doing
as
it.
in the case with Vucevic.
Exactly. I thought that was dumb. Speaking of Vucevic and Frye, neither one's really a rim deterrent, as good of shooters as they are. So are the wing defenders on this team going to be able to keep opponents out of the paint and prevent easy layups?
No.
Wow.
They aren't. There's no rim deterrent. And while Payton, Aaron Gordon, Oladipo, Mo Harkless, all of those guys are young, athletic, quick, eager to defend, guess what? There's no hand check rules.
Yeah.
So perimeter defense is mostly trying to slow them down, trying to make it tougher to get to the rim. If you ask any NBA player, any single one of them, you could pick the 15th man off the Sixers and ask them. They're going to say, I don't care what the guy on me is doing. I don't worry about him at all. I'm worried about what the help defense is going to be doing, because that's going to determine what I'm going to be able to do on this offensive possession. So while they've got guys who project to be really good, at least on-ball man defenders on the wings, I don't think that means they're going to prevent many driving attempts into the lane, especially when there's no rim protector there to deter those guys. On top of it, there's a lot of things that go into defense, and you could be a really good on-ball individual, quote-unquote, stopper, but what if you suck at forcing your way through screens, chasing a guy like a Kyle Korver or a Ray Allen, Rip Hamilton, Reggie Miller type? Then you could be the best-looking defender one night against guys like Paul George on the perimeter, and then the next night you get torn the heck up by Kyle Korver when you play the Hawks.
Yeah.
So it's while I think those guys project as a strong perimeter defensive group, they're still going to struggle as long as they don't have somebody to act as a rim deterrent.
Absolutely. Speaking of guys who might struggle, both Aaron Gordon and Elfrid Payton have some pretty serious holes in their games. With this team having capable veterans at power forward and point guard in Channing Frye and Luke Ridnour, do you think that eats into the minutes for the Rooks?
Not really. Channing Frye is going to be the starting power forward. Aaron Gordon's going to have less minutes available to him just from that perspective. But and I think this is a terrible idea, but he's going to get minutes at the 3, too.
Oh, God.
Don't you think I'm right, though?
I think you're entirely right.
Yeah. It's not a good idea.
I don't want to.
It's not a good idea, but he's going to get...
drafting a bunch of guys who can't shoot, so...
Yeah, he's going to get small forward minutes, so Aaron Gordon's going to get minutes. Elfrid Payton is the starting point guard. Luke Ridnour is going to get minutes behind him. And like we said, Fournier and Oladipo will also get some minutes in that role. But it's Elfrid Payton's job. I think part of it, too, the acquisition of Fry especially, probably allows for more minutes for Aaron Gordon because you still have a stretch element at the forward slots. Mm-hmm. He just happens to be playing power forward, and then the guy who would normally be considered power forward skill set wise is able to play the nominal 3 position.
Right. So 20-50-80 is just what we use to do predictions. Because what the hell is the point of a season preview without predictions?
Yeah.
So we say things we think are 20%, 50%, and 80% likely. Josh, what are your predictions?
So I think it's 20% likely that Elfrid Harry Payton wins the Rookie of the Year in a season somewhat similar to Michael Carter-Williams' rookie year, where he gets a massive opportunity. He's the primary ball handler, and it gets big minutes, but is woefully inefficient. But he still puts up crazy box score stats that people are like, yes. The only reason it's only at 20% is because I think there's a guy in Milwaukee, Jabari, who's going to put up a pretty nice number of points per game over the course of the season, as he'll most likely be the primary scoring option for that Bucks team, at least by the end of the season. But Elfrid Payton should have, from a box score statistic basis, a pretty solid case for a Rookie of the Year consideration.
Yep.
I think it's 50% likely that Tobias Harris winds up leaving the Magic in this offseason as a free agent. Part of that is they have Aaron Gordon, Mo Harkless, Channing Frye now. They've got guys who are kind of eating into his minutes and opportunity a bit. And on top of it, and bear in mind this is coming from Chris Broussard, who's not necessarily a particularly reliable newsbreaker.
Ooh, shots fired.
Whatever. I don't care. Come at me, Broussard. He said that apparently Tobias Harris's Nike deal includes a clause that will pay him more money if he winds up in a bigger market such as LA, New York, or Chicago. Mm-hmm. So the reason it's only 50% is you never quite know in free agency on what type of year Tobias is going to have, if it makes it advantageous for him to get a better offer from some other team, or if the Magic's offer would be tops. And also, it's from Broussard, so I don't know.
Yeah, you don't know which one of the multiple sources is going to town on that.
But I think it's possible, hence 50-50. I think it's 80% likely that this team is going to be bad enough where they yet again wind up with a top 5 pick in next year's lotto, where they also, once again, won't draft a shooter. They'll probably once more go for a guy who's defensive-minded, long, athletic, and works hard.
Yeah, like Kelly Oubre.
Maybe.
I don't know. Speaking of maybe, I think that it's a 20% likely chance that Aaron Gordon wins the dunk contest. It's a thing that might happen. I think he gets into it, maybe.
I can see that.
Yeah.
He's got some stiff competition from Minnesota, though.
He does. And underrated dunker out in Brooklyn, and Markel Brown. I think he's better than all these guys at dunking, but that's just me. I'm a little biased. I think it's 50% likely that one of this team's young wings, like, how could you be Mo Harkless? Or Tobias Harris, gets traded by draft night next year, either through the season or whatever. Because like you mentioned, all these young dudes who can't shoot, the experiment, especially on those two guys, is kind of coming to an end, I think.
And like we mentioned, Aaron Gordon's going to get some small forward minutes this year, too.
And I think it's 80% likely that Jacque Vaughn gets fired mid-season. I know it's a little steep.
I think it's very steep because I think this organization knows that they're rebuilding. I don't think they're expecting him to make like a playoff push. And generally speaking, what gets coaches fired are expectations. That's how coaches are measured. It's not necessarily win-loss or how well their team played, regardless of the record. It's what are the expectations on them.
Okay, fine. I'll offer an addendum. I'll say the next 3 years.
Oh, in the next 3 years, yeah, I agree.
Okay, I'll offer an addendum. I was getting a little sensationalist. But not to be sensationalist, I don't think this team is going to be good for a long time.
Yeah, when you ask me if the Magic are going to be good, that's a big, huge, steaming pile of NARP.
But hopefully this video wasn't of that description. So if you liked it, leave a thumbs up. If you didn't like it, leave a thumbs down. And maybe leave a comment saying why, or if you agree that this team is a big, heaping, smelly pile of NARP, or if you disagree. Share this video on Twitter or Facebook if you feel like it. If you like this video, there's a subscribe button down there. It'll help you be notified of our future videos. And if you feel like it, there are going to be a couple of links to some our other team previews, either on this side or on this side. I haven't decided it yet. But I think that wraps us up. Josh, you have any final words?
Yeah, let's figure out what exactly you call an Orlando Magic player. Somebody in the comments, please, in the comments, let's come up with some way to talk about Orlando Magic players without having to say the word player.
Agreed. So with that, I think we're out. Thanks a bunch for watching, everybody.
Take care.
Peace out.